Okay. Have you ever noticed that there is a percentage of parents in the world that like to moan, whinge, and complain about women who are childless by choice? And it is about women who are childless by choice. And it is parents that are moaning, whinging, and complaining about other women who are childless by choice. And I don't know if it's just my opinion or if there are others out there that believe the same thing, but it seems that it's completely, totally, and utterly from a place of complete jealousy over the fact that these women have the ability to live a life of their choosing. They can do whatever they want, they can go wherever they want, they have the freedom to just live their life without any hindrance, without worrying about anything at all. The only thing they have to worry about is their finances and their jobs and, everyday living. They don't have to worry about anything else. They've got their lives to worry about. Whatever's going on in their lives, that's all they're worrying about. That's all they're dealing with. And for some of these people, there's a lot for them to deal with. For some of them, there isn't. We don't know what goes on in their lives. We don't know why they've chosen to be childless by choice. That seems like a weird thing to say, but you know what I meant. There's a reason why they've chosen to be childless. And the fact is, they live their lives the way they want to, without the actual burden of having children. And they are a burden. Children are a burden to parents. They are the most amazing, most incredible, most pain in the arse burden. They are. Because children, they can be absolute little devils, and that is a very polite way of saying it. And then they will do something that will be the most amazing, most incredible, most, something that will make you go, oh, that's so amazing. And you'll be so proud of them. And you will look at them and go, that's why I had you, because you did things like that. And I love you so much. And oh, I want another one. And then they'll do something else and you go, yeah, no, don't. No, not if you're going to do shit like that. I'm not going to have another one now. No, that's why I'm not going to have another one. That's why I decided to only leave one. No. Mm-mm. Yeah. They are lovely when they're asleep. They are perfect when they're asleep. Because they're not causing trouble when they're asleep. When they're awake, they can be the most loving, caring, amazing little beings on the planet, but they can also be absolute little devils. But we have to worry about them 24/7. We have to worry about them 24/7. We don't get a second off. We don't get a minute off. We don't get any time off as parents. Even when we send them off to their nannies or their aunts or their uncles or their cousins and they go off for play dates with their friends, or we leave them with a babysitter so we can go out for the night, or whatever. We are still worrying about them, even if we are leaving them with somebody else so that we can have a bit of a break from, it doesn't stop the fact that we worry about them, even when we know we've left them in really good hands while we go while we go out with our friends for a couple of nights, or we got date night with our partner. It doesn't change the fact that we're worrying about them or thinking about them. It's constant. It's 24/7. There is no off switch for parents. There just isn't. We don't have an off switch. Parents are just 24/7. And there is one thing that we do that changes. When men turn around and say they are choosing to be childless, we all go, that's completely understandable, because in today's society and in the economy and, you know, the mental, emotional, physical, you know, that it takes to raise children, it's completely understandable why you don't want them. It's so expensive to raise children. And the younger they are, the most expensive it gets. You know, because at least by the time they hit secondary school, we can, you know, control the expenses a little bit more. You know, once they hit secondary school, we have more control of the expenses. It's still extremely expensive, but we have a little bit more control of the expenses as they hit secondary school and get a bit older. But it doesn't change how expensive it is, and especially in the economy we live in today, and especially in, you know, how society is, there is so much that we have to deal with as parents, and it doesn't even change the mental, the emotional, the physical, you know, part and side of it all, you know. And so we all go, that's perfectly understandable. We all go, that's fine, you know. I don't blame them for not wanting children. But we do not do the same thing when it comes to women. We yell, we scream, we shout, and we complain. How dare they not want children? They're the most amazing things on this planet. How dare you not want a child? Why would you never want that? They're so loving, they're so caring, they're so this. You're such a lovely bond. You love, you know, you'd never know love like you do when you have a child. We throw shit like that at them. It's completely unbalanced. But it's the same argument for both. If we're going to throw an argument like that at women, we should throw the same argument at men, because you still have the same bond. I know that we carry them, but they can still have the same bond with them. There's still the same love there. But for women, it's actually far more mentally and emotionally draining. You know, women are far more prone to things like peri and post-depression. You know, and which is actually really dangerous, especially for a newborn. You know, at least it can be. You know, if the mother isn't helped, it can be detrimental for the baby. You know, as well as for the mother. You know, there have been cases of women with post. There is another word in between the post and the depression, but I can't remember what it is. Postnatal depression, perinatal depression, and postnatal depression. That's the one. But there have been women, new mothers with postnatal depression who've actually harmed their newborns because their brain doesn't recognise it as theirs, or friendly, or nice, or they're so overstimulated, they're so overwhelmed, they're so whatever. Every time it makes a noise, every time it cries, their brain becomes so overwhelmed that they try to harm their baby, and they don't even mean to do it. There have been cases where they've actually killed a baby, has died because the new mother has had postnatal depression. You know, so these things do happen, and they have happened because of things like that. So actually, it can be more detrimental for a woman to have a baby. And if she doesn't get the right help, or she's prone to things like that, she's prone to depression in general, and something like that happens and she ends up with postnatal and she's not given the right help, it could end up 10 times worse. And yet we're pushing this narrative in society that it's not okay to be childless by choice. Why aren't we? Why are we as parents? And the thing is, I don't think it would be quite as serious. I think as women, it wouldn't be so noticeable if it wasn't for the fact that it's other parents that are shoving this narrative that it's not okay to be childless by choice. It's okay for men to be childless by choice, but it's not okay for women to be childless by choice. And it is parents. There is a percentage, it's not all, it is definitely not all. There is a large percentage of parents that believe that everybody has the right to make that decision, and they praise women who make that choice to be childless, because, you know, everybody has that right, and they think that if they make that choice, good on them. But there is a percentage of women, there are a percentage of parents that are pushing a narrative through society that it is not okay for women to be childless by choice. And that is dangerous. Because if that picks up speed, if that becomes a big thing in society, it will become very, very harmful. You know, because if women start getting this concept that they are a bad person, or start feeling guilty for not wanting children, that'll have a really serious effect on their mental health. You know, oh, but if it's okay for men to be childless by choice, am I a bad person for not wanting children? Why am I a bad person and he's not? Does that mean I have to have children, otherwise I'm awful? And what if I have children and then I'm an awful mum? You know, it'll start having a really adverse effect on women. Parents have to, that percentage of parenting, they have to stop this mindset that women need to have children, because they don't. It's not all women want kids. Who doesn't want them, you know, because there are people out there that just don't want kids. They don't have to have kids. They don't feel maternal in any way. Long gone are the days where women have no other choice. There's nothing on the planet left for them to do but have children. You know, we are living in a society where women do not have to have children, because actually they can have their lives any way they want and do whatever the hell they want. Now, we have to stop pushing a narrative that it's okay for men to be childless, but it's not okay for women. And it may only be a small percentage of parents and a small percentage of people that are pushing this narrative. But there is a percentage of people that are pushing a narrative that it is not okay for women to be childless by choice. And it seems really silly and a really minor thing to think about, and to say, oh, well, it's only a small amount, nobody will think anything about it, nobody pays any attention to it, and nobody cares about those people, and nobody pays any attention to them, and everyone just brushes it off. But if the narrative is pushed hard enough and often enough, there will come a point where somebody will stop ignoring it, or they'll say that to somebody who is vulnerable, and make them feel really bad about themselves, and actually do a lot of damage, purely because they cannot accept the concept that it is okay for women to be childless. And that is when this small percentage is going to start doing serious damage. Because when somebody vulnerable chooses to be childless, and they meet people who are telling them it's not okay, what is that going to do to that person? How is that going to affect somebody who is already vulnerable, who is already struggling mentally or emotionally? And that's a point where their actions affect other people in a really negative way. And how many others will they then affect? It has a knock-on effect. They could do some real serious damage because they can't accept that some women just don't want children, because actually they can't be mothers. They don't want to be mothers. They have no interest in being mothers. They have no maternal instincts, and even if they do have maternal instincts, they have no interest in actually wanting children, because they like the life they have. They enjoy the life they have, and they don't want to upset it, or they're already really vulnerable and actually they have serious issues they need to deal with. And having a child, they couldn't cope having a child. Even if at one point in their life they might have wanted one, something had happened and now they could not actually handle having children anymore. You have no idea the damage you could do. These people could have done just by complaining and moaning and whinging and having a go at other women just for being childless by choice. And I've gone round in circles a bit. It bothers the hell out of me that there is a percentage of parents out there, and it's not just mothers, but fathers as well, because they get up in arms that there are women out there that don't want to be mothers. So it's not just mothers, it's fathers as well. So there are parents out there that get up in arms at women who choose not to be mothers. And it bothers me so much, because you just don't know the damage it's going to do. Because you don't know what that person's been through. You don't know what kind of harm a narrative like that could actually do to the person you're yelling at. Or you could be yelling at somebody who is strong enough to stand up and say, I'm not listening to this. You, I'll do me. But it's not going to change anything. So you carry on. Narratives like that are not okay. And separating men and women into categories of mother, father, just because you don't like it, doesn't make it right. It's okay for men not to be fathers, but it's not okay for women to not be mothers. It's the wrong narrative. It's okay if men and women do not want to be parents. That is perfectly fine. You dare tell people that that's wrong. You separate them again. I mean, it's bad enough that you separate parents into you're a bad mother just by doing the bare. Separate. Fathers are great just for doing the bare minimum. And mothers are awful just because they took their eyes off their kid for 3 seconds. How dare you? It's bad enough that you do that. But to judge non-parents and separate them into, it's okay for men not to be parents, but it's not okay for women to not be parents. Absolutely not. That is the wrong message. It's okay if they don't want to be parents. It's okay for men to not be parents, and it's okay for women to not be parents. They're the same. And the argument for both is exactly the same. It really is. The narrative is exactly the same. And no matter how you try to spin it, the percentage that are spurring this movement on are completely wrong. The movement are yelling and screaming at women for not wanting children are completely in the wrong, and they need dealing with. You know, they're worse than the Karens of the world. We all deal with the Karens of the world. We all know how to handle the Karens of the world. Well, these percentage are worse than the Karens of the world. We can ignore the Karens of the world because, quite frankly, they're just blowing hot air, moaning, whinging, complaining about every little thing because they can. These people could actually be doing a hell of a lot of damage. You know, you're a woman, you have to have children. If you don't want to have children, there's something wrong with you. And how dare you say you don't want children? They're yelling at women for not wanting children without knowing anything about them. There could be any number of reasons why they don't want to have children, why they're childless by choice. There could be any number of reasons. And by yelling and screaming at them, they could be making any one of those reasons 10 times worse. Or they could be yelling and screaming at someone who is childless by choice. They could be yelling at someone who is fine and just strong enough to stand there and go, shut the hell up. And that's, you know, who has no problems, who has no issues and is perfectly fine and just decides they don't want to change their lifestyle. You know, and strong enough to stand up to these people and go, yeah, just shut the hell up. But they could be yelling at someone who has a hell of a lot of issues, and there's a reason why they don't want to have children. And all they're doing is harming them and doing a hell of a lot more damage. They really do bug me, and they seriously need. I'm going to go, because, yeah. Anyway, I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.